Welcome to a guest episode of the NERO Show featuring Zipp product manager Nathan Shickle.
Nathan's going to give us a quick overview of Zipp's latest product releases specifically related to their road wheel sets and tires. And then we're going to hit him with some questions about why they've done things the way they are, with questions like why they've stuck with steel over carbon spokes, why they're moving to ceramic bearings from steel, the seemingly a bit outdated widths on their 454 NSW in particular.
All right, let's get into the chat with Nathan.
What we're launching is a new 353 NSW, which is completely redesigned from the ground up. So new rim shape. The new rim shape is designed to be as light as possible, integrate the new Zipp axis wheel sensor into the rim, which is a tire pressure sensor. It also features our new in-mold graphics. So the white graphic that you see at the valve, that's printed with our Impress technology. The rest of the graphics on the rim are actually as it comes out of the mold. And this is something that we've been working on for quite a while. As you probably know, we don't paint our rims. So we have the opportunity to use some of the technologies that we have with just high quality molds and create a surface finish that is second to none. So that's the rim. And then the hub is the new ZR1 SL hub. So based on the driver mechanism that we use in our current Firecrest and SW level wheels, we've taken that up a notch by creating a lighter weight hub shell, putting in high quality ceramic bearings, and then overall just creating a lighter weight hub system to be used in our NSW wheels. So we're updating the 454 and the 858 NSW wheels with that new ZR1 SL hub set. And then finally, the 303 SW is the new wheel set that will replace the 303 Firecrest. And the 303 SW wheel set is a really fun wheel set because we've designed it around the use case we're really seeing riders using it as. And what I mean by that is riders are buying it and they're using it on all-road bikes. They're using it on gravel bikes. Our professionals use the 303 Firecrest as the cobble race wheel and as the cyclocross wheel. So we really took a moment and redesigned the rim for wider tires. And what we did was we designed the rim shape so that it has relatively equal aerodynamic performance, whether you're riding a 29 millimeter tire or a 35 millimeter tire. And so what that does for us is that allows for riders, our Pro Tour riders, when they go to a race like Paris-Roubaix, they can put on a 32 or a 34 millimeter tire and not see any aerodynamic loss. And then to add to all of that, we have the Zipp axis wheel sensor giving real-time tire pressure data to the rider as they're riding. And so overall, that 303 SW really fits into that niche of the rider that may want to ride road, may want to ride some gravel, may ride some cobblestones or something rough in between, and they can do everything with a single wheel set. The last 4 products that we have launching are some new tires that we've co-developed with Goodyear. Last year, we started with our Goodyear for Zipp Fitment Series tires. And this year we're expanding on that. So we have a new road race tire specifically built around the 404 and the 454 wheel sets called the Goodyear Eagle F1R Z29 Aero.
Rolls off the tongue.
It does. I've had some practice. We have the new Vector R Explorer, which is a 40 millimeter road tire built for our 303 Explorer gravel wheel. And really where that came from were both requests internally at Zipp, and then also externally from customers of riders who had the 303 Explorer but wanted to ride them on the road and at higher speeds. And so what we did was we went and developed a robust, high volume road tire that fits on that 303 Explorer. And honestly, that's the wheel and tire setup I've been running through most of the winter, and it changes the way you ride. It's awesome. And then finally, to meet the needs of gravel riders and gravel riders wishing to ride wider tires, we've got wider variants of our existing Goodyear for Zipp tires. So the Goodyear Explorer Slick, which has a slick center tread and side knobs. Last year we launched it in 40 millimeter section width. We now have a 45 millimeter section width. And the Goodyear Explorer Enter, which is a full knob gravel tire. Last year we launched it in 45. We're now adding a 50 millimeter section width. So just basically moving everything up, giving riders the wider tires that they're looking for anyway.
So I noticed on this update, no carbon spokes on any of the wheel sets. And we've kind of seen brands, when they're releasing the 2025 wheels, it's like this decision. Are they staying on steel spokes or are they moving to carbon spokes? And it looks like in this update, Zipp have chosen to stay with steel. Did you test carbon spokes? What's the sort of the analysis on why you haven't moved to carbon spokes?
It's really hard to beat steel as a spoke material. And, there are several reasons why. One, for the strength you get out of a steel spoke, you can make that steel spoke section pretty small and pretty lightweight. And making it small is the important part, because adding a super thick spoke or a larger section spoke doesn't make the wheel more aerodynamic. In fact, it can have the reverse effect. So that's the first part. Secondly, our wheels are bought and ridden all over the world and need to be repairable all over the world. And we don't see carbon spokes as readily available yet. And so if somebody has an accident and can't get their wheel into a Zipp service center to be repaired, they need to be able to buy a steel spoke, and those are readily available. And so we've stuck with that. And then finally, we've only just started looking at carbon spokes in the last 9 months. And given that, we don't have enough information about it. It's something that we're looking at, but it's not something we're ready to put on the market with.
So in time, just coming back real quick to the performance side of it, you guys still feel that there isn't a performance advantage, certainly aerodynamically, going to that bladed carbon spoke?
We don't know yet. We don't know enough yet to say yes or no. So it's one of the features that could develop in a Zipp wheel in the future. But at the moment, the way we look at things is if we're going to make a change, like move from a steel spoke, which everybody has known and everybody has used, to a carbon spoke, we're going to be testing it for quite a while. We're going to know as much about it as possible, and so that we can understand if there's a failure, how that failure happens. We can understand how it's repaired in the field, so we can tell people how to repair it in the field. We can understand, do we need to be delivering spare spokes with the wheel or not? And all of those questions need to be answered, and we're not ready to answer those questions yet. So that's why we're not moving to carbon spokes.
I guess I'm a little surprised in that Zipp, which is kind of considered to be market-leading wheel brand, seems to be a bit behind the 8-ball on carbon spokes, not necessarily because you're not using them, but because for you, as a brand, it's still a bit of an unknown. Like, I am surprised like that, because there have been carbon spokes coming out on wheels for a few years now. Is that a frustration internally that you are a bit behind, or do you not think you're behind? You know what I kind of mean? It feels like, Zipps are like a couple years behind on the testing there.
I don't feel we're behind. And I'll give you the best analogy I can. So, if this is going to cast way back to 2010, so which was when we launched the 404 Firecrest, the first carbon clincher that we had. At that point, carbon clinchers had been on the market for 3 or 4 years, and consistently we were asked, "Why don't you have a carbon clincher?" And we simply told people we didn't feel the technology was there yet, because at the time we were dealing with a rim brake system, and that rim brake system put heat into the system of the rim, and that caused a whole bunch of bad problems downstream. And so it took us several years to create a carbon clincher system that we were happy with. And so, yeah, we were late to the market, but when we came to the market, we had market leading product.
Mm-hmm.
And so I look at carbon spokes as essentially the same thing. We're going to do all of our homework. We're going to make sure that we have dotted every I and we have crossed every T, and we have made sure that we're ready to come to market with something. And when we do, it's going to be ready and it's going to be market leading. And the reality is, yeah, it loses weight. It removes weight from a wheel. It is a great way to take weight out of a wheel. We're still not sure of any other benefits.
I think from my perspective, that's the interesting part of this, because you're right. I mean, the weight saving, whatever, that is there. It's undeniable. But the still the thing for me, and both Jesse and I have ridden the steel spokes and the carbon spokes, and we debate this week in, week out. I mean, I personally still feel like the current crop of carbon spoked wheels feel slower, perform slightly worse in crosswinds. And I'm surprised, a little bit like Jesse, I'm surprised in maybe that the testing isn't quite there yet, from an industry perspective.
You've seen it come out with a few different brands in the market, but at the same time, carbon spokes aren't readily available. It's not like you can go to a distributor and buy thousands of carbon spokes and be ready to and have a handful of spokes. You actually have to find that vendor and really do your homework with that vendor. And so that's one of the reasons why we haven't done a full round of testing. We also have had resources dedicated to the projects that we're releasing the wheels we have today. And so as we look at it, will there be something with carbon spokes in the future? Quite possibly. I can't say yes or no, because we don't know enough yet.
Can I ask a question, just about you mentioned when you were discussing the products that the 303s were going to be performing at a similar level aerodynamically with a 29 mil tire up to, I think you mentioned like a 35 mil. Is that right?
That's correct. Yes.
How?
So we have market leading aerodynamic technology, and we have a crop of engineers who have been designing aerodynamic rims for almost a decade or more now. Like the design engineer behind the 303 SW rim, this is his 6th or 7th wheel design, and that includes going from individual rim design to the wind tunnel, taking that from the wind tunnel to real world development, and designing the laminate and bringing it to market. And so because of that, they have the experience to understand what do we need to do to make it fast with X and Y. And admittedly, when I handed that challenge to them, they scoffed and they were like, well, what? And, the engineers that I work with are really a brilliant group of people, and they put their heads together, and we went to the wind tunnel with some 3D printed prototype wheels, literally 3D printed rims, and played around with different tire shapes. And when we came up with the rim shape that worked with the 35 millimeter section width tire that we had chosen and the 30 millimeter or the 29 millimeter section width that we had chosen, and we saw the benefits that we wanted, okay, great. And when you look at the wind tunnel graph, you have those two, the same wheel, but different tires within a watt of each other, within about 10 grams of drag of each other. So they're relatively equal. They're not exactly equal, but they're relatively equal.
So does that mean that urban myth? Well, maybe it's an urban myth now. What was it, like 110% of your rim width had to be the width of the tire? Is that sort of now defunct? Because I'm assuming that a 35 mil tire will sit very differently on this rim than a 29 mil will.
So this particular rim is 33 millimeters wide at its widest, and so it splits the difference. And
okay.
The rule of 105 really came into play back when we were using really big rotors that were about 700 millimeters. And we use these things called rim brakes. And At that point, the brake track itself was always narrower than the widest portion of the rim. So you had to use a tire and a rim that were appropriately sized to reattach airflow from the tire to the rim after the brake track. Now that we no longer deal with rim brakes, we can create a different shape of rim that keeps the airflow attached all the way across the tire and onto the rim. And we're not dealing with the airflow coming unattached and then reattaching. And so that makes the rule of 105 less important. It's still there, and tire size still matters, but it makes it less important than it did at one point.
I'm very curious to get your opinion on the widths then. So the new 303 says it's designed for a 30 to 35 mil tire, and that's got the 25 internal, 33 external widths. But I like to use, on the rear, I use a 32. On the front, I'll use a 28 or a 30, depending on the width, depending on the rim width. And that's kind of what most people are generally moving towards to. So why did you choose to stick with the 23 internal, 27.5 external on the 454? Why didn't you match that for the 454 so that we could use the 30 mil and the 32 mil tires and not suffer the aerodynamic penalty? Because the 454 is now recommended for the 29 mil or 28 mil tire, which seems to be a bit outdated for what most of us want to use now. Is there a reason why you didn't go wider on the 454?
So first of all, changing the rim on the 454 was out of scope of the project. So the 454 was only receiving that hub update. So it wasn't something we were properly resourced to do. That's point one. Point two is that at the highest levels of professional racing, we still have riders wanting to ride on a 28 millimeter tire. And part of the reason for that is when you take one of our teams who are sponsored by Vittoria. So they have access to the Corsa Pro and the Corsa Pro Speed. Between the Corsa Pro and the Corsa Pro Speed, there's about 30 grams of tire in a 28 millimeter tire. I think it's about 280 and 250 grams between the Corsa Pro and Corsa Pro Speed. So if you can still run a 28, you can save 60 grams over that wheel set. And at the beginning of the season, the 29 millimeter Corsa Pro Speed that I think is on the market wasn't on the market at the time. And so that wasn't an option. And so as the teams looked at that, they were looking at, okay, on good days, we can run this super lightweight tire, have an overall lighter weight system, and stick with 28. And, with some professional racing, we're still seeing riders wanting to stick with 28s. It's not always. And so, but at the same time, with a wheel set like a 404 or a 454, moving from a 28 to a 30 costs you about 2 watts, between 1 and 2 watts in aerodynamic advantage, but gives you in rolling advantage somewhere in the neighborhood of, I think, 5 to 6 watts.
That's on the current rim width.
That's on the current rim.
Okay, gotcha.
So
yep.
It's definitely not a loss to go to the wider tire, but some riders still want to choose the narrower tire. So, like I said, in the future, we're going to look at what is the right tire for road racing, and we're going to design around that right tire. And specific to that 454, that new Goodyear Eagle F1R, that's a 29 millimeter section width. And we chose that specifically to take advantage of faster rolling with a wider or a higher volume tire. But still, we're able to blend the sidewall of the tire in with the rim so we get the aerodynamics of a 28 millimeter tire.
Maybe a difficult question to answer, but I want to follow on from the chatting about the pros and sort of their input onto the design. Like, if you're looking at the 454 and assessing sort of an update to that, how much input comes from the pro teams versus, let's say, maybe what other aspects are there? Like, is there your own testing you've done? Are the bike manufacturers throwing in their 2 cents, or the tire manufacturers have their opinion? What's the split there that's dictating which direction you go in?
It depends on the wheel and it depends on the development. Like I said, the 454 just having a hub update, we didn't even touch the rim. And so we just maintained that same rim. But if we were looking at a 454 update, I would be talking to the pro teams and asking them what they want. I would be talking to tire manufacturers and trying to understand where they're going with their fast tires in the future. Are they going to make a 32 millimeter Corsa Pro Speed? If that's the case, then I need to really consider what tire I'm building or what tire we're going to build around. And then from the standpoint of bikes, there are still road bikes in the market that don't fit a 30. And so you do have to understand what that is. And, we have good relationships with OE, so we're able to say, hey, next road bike development, what is that tire size, and understand what that tire size is so we can be prepared and we can understand the envelope that we have to design in. And so all of those things come together, but then there's also our testing, right? And it's just like what we know about vibration loss and rolling resistance today, and the crossover between that and aerodynamics, and understanding those inputs, that's going to inform what we do with a wheel set in the future. And that informed like what we did with the 303 SW and the 353 NSW for this launch.
When was the 454 released, that update?
It was in 2022. I don't remember the date. I think it was June of 2022. And then the latest hub update was going live today, May 22nd.
So I've actually had a chance to ride those Vector R Explore tires, which are the slick tires on the Explore 303s. So the specs are kind of wild on this. I think, am I right in saying it's a 32 mil internal on that wheel, and that tire is a 40 mil?
Yeah.
And obviously I'm riding that on my gravel bike, a Cervelo Aspero. It's not the road bike, but it's been a really fast and enjoyable experience, and a couple of fast-paced group rides, etc. I don't know if this is if it's a question or a statement or what, but if you can help me out with this, because I'm enjoying the wheel, but I'd love to know, because obviously there's that setup, and then there's, take for example your 454 full road race spec, currently doing laps of Italy at the Giro wheel. How much slower is my Explore setup with that 40 mil tire than the fully fledged current iteration of road racing wheel? Is it miles off? What if you got any testing that might help me out?
I don't have specifically against a 28 millimeter tire on a 454, but I do have against like a 32 millimeter tire on a 303 Firecrest. And so the difference in aerodynamics is about 3 watts on smooth roads. The difference in rolling resistance, they're nearly equal.
What?
The rougher the roads get, the faster the system goes.
What are we doing?
Or hold on. Yeah, but it's a lot heavier though.
It's a yes. It is heavier.
It is a heavier system, and it has a different ride feel. Like,
yes,
I'll give you my personal feel of it. So if I'm going to go out and do a sprint workout, or I'm going to do a fast-paced ride that has sprints on it, I'm going to choose like 404s or 454s with a 28 or 30 millimeter tire, just because that system feels livelier to me. If I'm going to do a long road ride, whether it's fast-paced or it's just an easy coffee ride, but it's a long road ride, I'm going to choose the bike with the 303 Explorer and the Vector R Explore tires, because that bike is comfortable. And I can sit in a groove at 43 kilometers an hour and cat on that wheel and tire system and not have a problem. And so like I say that because last week I was doing exactly that, and so it's a case of, and I often say I live in bike first world because I have access to a really fast road bike. I've got a Cervelo Explorer, a Cervelo Soloist. I've got a Cervelo Aspero gravel bike, and I've got a Lightspeed gravel bike that I use as my winter road bike. And that's what has the Vector R Explorers on it. And so, you know, in between all of those bikes, like that Lightspeed with the 303 Explorer and the Vector R Explorer, that's a great long ride bike because no matter the road surface, it's comfortable and I can
Okay.
still go fast.
So my question, I mean, I completely agree. I got to ride that fast-paced group rides, etc., totally bit sluggish to accelerate, all the same thing. So then,
Yeah.
what is there? Where's the middle ground then at the moment? Do you think? I mean, obviously that you're almost backward engineering that Explore wheel because it is primarily a gravel wheel set in 2025.
Absolutely.
But is there a universe where a 32 mil rim internal absolutely optimized for road racing exists? Or are we still, is that just going to be too heavy a system? You don't think the engineers would be able to come up with something that would be suitable?
I think it very much depends on the course and the road type that you have. And that's when a wheel like that and a bike and tire setup like that would come into play. At Pro Tour level, it's like F1. Every bike has a different setup. Every race has a different setup. And so when you start to play some of those games and start to look at, okay, what is my best setup? You're probably going to find a race course where that a bike setup with that wheel and tire is going to be the fastest setup. And, you know, that wheel set's really fun to ride because when you show up on a group ride and people look at it and still, you know, when you're going 40K an hour and you're still wondering why you're still there, like it's fun, right? Like,
Look, I won't lie. The flex points were high. I was enjoying that. Absolutely, totally.
Yeah.
So we're just going to pause for a minute, Jesse, to talk about today's show partner, Pillar Performance. Now, whilst traditional nutrition products like hydration and carbohydrates will take you through to the finish line, Pillar's mission is to get you to the start line in the best condition over and over.
In this episode, Pillar wants to bring awareness to the benefits that magnesium supplementation can have for you as a cyclist, particularly as it relates to sleep and recovery. So do you have trouble getting to sleep each night? Or do you suffer from reduced sleep quality, particularly after your biggest training rides? If so, magnesium supplementation can help improve all areas of your sleep by regulating melatonin production and reducing those pesky cramps that interrupt your sleep quality. Pillar's triple magnesium is a 300 milligram blend of absorbable forms of magnesium that tastes great, and it's also in Form Sport batch tested to be free from banned ingredients.
Now, if you would like to try Pillar today, get 15% off using code NERO at pillarperformance.shop, or for North American listeners, head to thefeed.com/pillar and enter code NERO for 15% off. Now, if you were using this last week and having difficulty with the code is active. However, it is a one-time purchase code, so you can't use that code over and over to restock. That's why that was turning you down. Big thanks to Pillar for supporting today's episode.
So, I think all the Zipp wheel sets are hookless still. Or not still.
Mm-hmm.
Probably, I'm guessing Zipp's just sticking with hookless. Would you ever go back to hooked?
Never say never.
Hmm.
We currently don't have a use. Well, aside from track racing, we currently don't have a use case where hooked makes a lot of sense. Because low pressure and wider tires generally win the day when you're outside of an indoor wood velodrome.
Mm-hmm.
And so from that perspective, a hook system can work just as well as a hook system. A hookless system can work just as well as a hook system.
So if I had a set of reserves which are hooked, and then I'm looking at buying some Zipps and they're hookless, and I go, okay, cool, I'll just have to check the tire compatibility, make sure my pressures are right, and it should be safe. My question still is, but what am I gaining by going to a hookless wheel set? Because my personal opinion is that it's just kind of annoying and I would rather just have it hooked. But am I missing something? What's the gain by having it hookless?
So the gain by having it hookless is better rim to tire transition, which gives you better rim aerodynamics. generally a lighter weight rim, and I don't have the reserve specifications memorized, so I can't say X reserve wheel is going to be lighter than Y Zipp wheel or vice versa. But generally, we're going to see a lighter weight rim and therefore a lighter weight wheel set when you're comparing apples to apples. And then finally, just being able to truly take advantage of having a tire that is shaped correctly and rolls well over rougher terrain or rougher roads, is the biggest benefit.
Yeah, the tire, the rolling resistance one, I can't. I'm obviously not. I don't know, but with the weight thing, I mean, like the cycling news wheel test, the wheel set that won that is also one of the lightest. That was the Scope Artec 6.8s, which were obviously it's carbon spoke, so it's going to be lighter. So you could probably say, oh well, spec for spec, if that, and that's a hooked wheel set. So if that was hookless, you could maybe say, like, how much if Scope went hookless, how much lighter would that wheel set be? Do you know roughly what you're saving going hookless?
It's not a cut off the hook and you have X number of grams saved.
Okay.
Because when we approached making a hookless wheel, and this goes way back to 2018 and 2019, and we were redesigning what would become the 303 Firecrest. What we did was we started with essentially our engineers sat in a room and had clean sheets of paper and said to ourselves, if none of us had any history of designing a carbon wheel, how would we design a carbon wheel today? And the goal was to get the wheel back to the weights where we felt they should be, reduce the cost of the wheel, and overall improve our manufacturing system for throughput. And we achieved all of those goals. And at the time, that meant, and this is going back to like 2020, that meant about a 15% reduction in cost. That meant about a 15% reduction in weight. And overall, our production system improved not only with a throughput perspective, but lower waste. And so all of those advantages were what we saw with a hookless system. So it wasn't like we just took an existing 303 rim and chopped off the hooks and bingo, there's our new wheel. It was a complete redesign of the rim itself and a complete redesign of our manufacturing system. And all of that had benefits that came along with it. So I can't really say that scope wheel, if you took the hooks off, what would it be? Because I don't know enough about that wheel.
Gotcha. Yeah. So I'm just laughing because someone in a bike shop somewhere in Sydney once had a rumor that Zipp were going to be gluing the hooks back on. So when you just said you could chop the hooks off, I'm thinking, well, you could also glue them back on.
It was.
I think that was an old
hashtag glue, hashtag bond the hooks or something. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So just am I coming back to this, or maybe I'm going forward to this? But just the so obviously you guys are working with Goodyear tires, and so you discussed on the 303s having a similar aerodynamic performance cost from the 29 through to the 35. What's the benefit of staying in the Goodyear package? What about if I love Conti tires? Absolutely, I legitimately think they're the best tire out there. Do we know what I'd be potentially losing going to a Conti tire on your setup, or potentially gaining something on that setup?
I'm going to take a step back and I'll answer your question eventually, Chris. So back in 2018 and 2019, when we started with that project, the whole idea was built around this idea of total system efficiency. And it was us moving away from looking just at aerodynamics as the key to speed and really identifying what we saw were 4 different things that slowed riders down. First is aerodynamics. Second is the weight of the product. The third is rolling resistance, which is often related to tire, but also related to how the tire is shaped by the rim. And then fourth is vibration loss. And the difference between rolling resistance and vibration loss is rolling resistance is how the tire operates. Vibration loss is the effect of the road on the sack of meat that sits on top of the bike. So, and that's a crude way of saying when the rider is on a bike, the rider is constantly moving up and down, whether it's a super smooth road or it's a cobblestone road, they're moving up and down to some degree as they roll over the undulations on the road. And so understanding those vibration losses and understanding how to combat those vibration losses were part of the things that led us to a hookless system, along with all of the benefits that I explained earlier. As we came to market, one of the things that we realized was, well, the end game for total system efficiency is to have tires designed around our wheels. We don't want to walk down a path of these are the tires you have to ride, but what we're doing is we're trying to offer an optimized system. So, like with 353 NSW, the Goodyear for Zipp, Vector R NSW Z30 tire is the optimized tire for that wheel. For 454, the optimized tire is the Goodyear Eagle F1R Z29 NERO. So as we look at that, we've worked specifically with Goodyear to design a tire specific to our wheels. And Jesse, to speak to some of your questions about hookless and tire compatibility. So when a tire is designed for an ISO compatible rim, and so the International Standards Organization, sets out dimensions for what a hookless rim is, or a TSS rim, a tubeless straight side rim is. And so all of those dimensional responsibilities lie on the wheel manufacturer. And what that means is then we're giving a common known envelope for the tire manufacturers to design a tire around. And tire fitment and tire retention is the responsibility of the tire manufacturer. And so by us making sure that our wheels hit those dimensions 100% of the time and have very little variance, gives all tire manufacturers a common envelope to design around when they're designing a hookless compatible tire. But with Goodyear, that allows them to truly design the tire to mate perfectly with the rim. The best example of that is the new Eagle F1R Z29 NERO, because it has a feature on it called the Aero Lip, which actually blends the sidewall of the tire in with the top of the rim. And that's what gives us the aerodynamic advantage to allow us to run a 29 millimeter tire on a 28 millimeter, on a rim designed around a 28 millimeter tire. And so that gives us an aero advantage and optimizes the total system. So Chris, to answer your question, depending on the tire, like if you're choosing a Conti, depending on the tire, if it's a GP5000 STR, you're equal or better with the Goodyear system. Okay. So if it's one of the TT tires, you may see slightly lower rolling resistance with that TT tire. Mm-hmm. And it just depends on what you want to achieve.
I mean, do you think we'll see more and more of this just across all the wheel? Because this whole package performance, system weight, system performance thing is very much the chat at the moment. Mm-hmm. Do you think, I mean, this is what we're going to see going forward?
My crystal ball is pretty foggy sometimes. And so I want to say yes. It makes sense that it's the direction we go. I mean, when you look at a comparable market, the automobile market, and you look at mid-range cars and up, generally those have a tire that's bespoke to that car. Mm. And so this is looking at the same situation with a mid-range to high-level wheel set. We're looking at a bespoke tire specific to that wheel set to give the ride quality and give the performance that we want to see out of it. So can you use other tires on it? Absolutely. If tire manufacturer builds it to the correct dimensions, it can be used on it. That's why we make our rims to ISO standards and we don't step outside of ISO standards, save for gravel, and we can discuss that if we want. But from a road wheel perspective, we build our wheels to ISO standards because we want riders to be able to choose an ISO compatible, hookless compatible wheel or tire, and they can use it on our wheel. So, and you're going to see some of that language appear on our tire compatibility chart, as our tire compatibility chart is no longer going to be exhaustive. We will show tires, but if a tire manufacturer says that Hookless compatible and the size of the tire is correct, so like for 454, it's a 28 millimeter or larger tire, it's absolutely able to be used.
What does Zipp think about some of the Chinese brands popping up with these sort of 1,200 to 1,300 gram wheel sets for sub $2,000? Some of them even sub $1,500. Is that a bit of a threat? Are they not, in some aspects, just not on the same level as like a 454 NSW? What's the chat on the Chinese brands?
I can't specifically comment on competitors other than to say that we welcome competition because it makes us all better. And, we have been in the carbon wheel business for 30 years, and we're putting what we feel is the appropriately tested, appropriately designed product on the market. And all of that costs a certain amount of money. And so if other companies come behind us and have similar products, they can do that. And like I said, competition only makes us work harder.
So just on the, as I keep referencing the 454 NSW because for me that's the most relevant road race wheel set. So 1,420 grams. Are you guys happy with that weight for a market leader, the best sort of 50 to 60 mil deep wheel set that a consumer can buy? Are you happy with that weight, or would you like to see it lower, or just haven't had time to update it? Or is that the best weight for the balance of performance aspects?
So with the latest hub update, we've brought that down to right at 1,400 grams or just a little below that.
Okay.
So we did lose, it's minimal, but we lost about 25 grams, I believe. And so could it be lighter? Absolutely. We, well, the way I'm going to answer your question, Jesse, in a roundabout way.
Mm-hmm.
Our product development is built on a cadence. And so as we work through that cadence, we're going to work on different wheels. And so the wheels that we worked on in this current development were 303 and 353. With the advent of the ZR1 SL hub, we saw a reason to update 454 and 858, but it wasn't their time to get the redesign. And so just given that overall development cadence, it wasn't the time to do that. Will it happen in the future? Yeah, at some point we'll redesign the 454. It's not happening today, and we're watching the market to see where we land. And we're still relatively lightweight compared to most of the competition. There is competition out there with carbon spokes that's lighter than us. But the funny thing about weight is you can add 100 grams to your bike and then pedal it up the Koppenberg, so steep hill in Europe, and at 50K an hour. And do you know what that costs you in power output?
Not much.
About 0.8 watts. On flat ground, that weight doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you have to be going up a really steep hill at a really high speed for minor weight changes to matter. Now, does that mean everybody should ride 454 every day? Not necessarily. If you have a rider who's trying to win a mountain stage in the tour, and that decision point is going to be on the hill, then you're going to want to choose the lightest possible system. But if you have a wheel set for the guy that's going to ride on the front all day long, 454 is your wheel. You're going to have a road race like Milan San Remo, 454 is your wheel. So it depends on the event, and it depends on the day, and it depends on the job the rider is doing to choose that wheel.
If I'd seen a press release that says Zipp releases tire pressure sensor in 2025, I'd been like, cool. That's going to be really useful on my gravel wheels. To see it on the 353s, which are, I think, sort of by your own admission, the kind of endurance road category wheel was a surprise, I would say. Certainly when I saw that. So is there what's the rationale about that technology appearing on this particular wheel set? Is it just a timing thing that this is when that rim was being updated, or?
There were a whole lot of things going on, but as we look at it, tire pressure is critical for almost every single discipline of cycling, whether it's gravel, whether it's a road race. Tire pressure is something that's critical. And so, as you look at it, there are a lot of reasons to have an integrated tire pressure sensor. And I'll start with the simplest one. And this is the benefit that I saw as I started training on these wheels now, a little over 18 months ago, and started using them on a daily basis. And because I have multiple bikes and because I ride multiple bikes on a regular basis, when I would hop on my road bike that had my 'cause I ride 303 SWs, that had the 303 SWs with the Zipp Axis wheel sensor, the first thing I noticed was that I could give that bike a bounce, and it's an Axis product. So Axis, whether they're drivetrain products or the Zipp Axis wheel sensors, they have a shake to wake function. So you give your bike a little bounce, and that's going to wake up the tire pressure sensors, and those LEDs are going to go off. And immediately they're going to either flash green or flash red. It's going to tell you, your tires are good, go for a ride, or you need to add tire pressure, or you need to reduce tire pressure. It's a really simple benefit, but for me, it's meaningful because it saves me time. I don't immediately have to grab that pump. I can just give the bike a bounce and I know I'm ready to ride. So that's point one. Point two, sometimes you're out riding and the weather changes and that can change your tire pressure. You can, and I'll give you the best example that I have. Last summer, it's still not summer yet here. It's getting close, but it's still not summer yet here. But last summer, it was about 96 degrees Fahrenheit. So I guess that's approaching 25 degrees Celsius, give or take. And, aired my tires up inside the house, went outside. As I rolled down the road, within that first 15 minutes, I saw my tire pressure increase by 3 PSI. So I don't know, can't mentally do that conversion to bar, but it's a fraction of a bar, right? But it was a decent change, and it was a change enough that it changed the ride quality of my bike. So it's something that you would want to understand and know. And then moving on from that, there's levels of optimization that you can do. So say if you're training for an event and you can ride sectors of that event that are crucial, you can actually set laps on your cycling computer, and tire pressure is saved in the fit file along with speed and time and heart rate and power. And so you can then go back and dump that into, there are a couple programs on the internet, and then also you can just dump it into an Excel file and you can see all of that data aligned with each other. And so if you've made changes to your tire pressure on that ride as riding over different segments, you can use that to optimize your tire pressure and understand what that tire pressure needs to be. And so whether that's for a cobbled race like the Tour of Flanders or Paris-Roubaix, like this year we had our professionals riding the new 303 SW, or it's for a mountain stage where we would see riders riding the 353 NSW, being able to optimize that tire pressure and understand the changes that happen after you leave the start and you get to the top of the mountain and what those changes are useful for the rider. And that's why it's there. Having that understanding, being able to train and optimize, and then also being able to use it on race day. So that's why it's in the 353. It's a useful tool for the rider. That's also why it's in the 303 SW. Would I like to see it in the 303 Explorer? Absolutely, but the timing didn't work out right.
Honestly, I think we've chatted about this particular technology in the past. I think you're a little bit, Jesse, more of the, I'm not sure I really need this information. Whereas I kind of love the idea of being able to review tire pressure after the ride and, that was interesting. It was down to 42 PSI there. Oh, wow, that's interesting.
But unless I've got the pricing wrong, The 353 NSW that has the sensor is only $100 more than the 454s. Is that right?
Yes,
That doesn't have the sensor. So you're kind of,
that's
I
correct.
mean, you're basically getting it for $100 more than the other model that doesn't have it.
For me, I'm a well, I guess I have to be a bike nerd to do the job that I do, but I'm a pretty big bike nerd. And so I'm like you, Chris. As soon as I realized it was in the fit file and I could start playing with it, I started playing with it. But even more so, I use a Hammerhead cycling computer, and on the Hammerhead, they've got a really cool graphical display of a bike with two wheels. And if you're in the right tire pressure zone, they light up green. If you start losing tire pressure, or your tire pressure raises due to heat or something else, they turn red. And so it's really awesome to be riding along and look down and see, okay, I'm still in the green. I just have bad legs today. It's not that I have a flat tire. It's always a bummer to be told that, right? But you don't have to stop and squeeze the tire. You have to, or ask your buddy to tell you, do I have a flat? You can look down and now know you have bad legs, which as I get older, that's something that happens to me more often than it used to. But also at the same time, you have that ability to understand how tire pressure changes over a ride and use that seat of the pants feeling of, okay, I liked it when it was here, or I didn't like it when it was here, and start to note those things down. So, and you can correlate that to feeling better or worse.
So the retail price for most of the NSW series is $4,200, which
That's
is
correct.
right towards the upper end of the wheelset market. Personally, I think that's very expensive compared to kind of what you can get for your money, not from a Chinese brand or anything, but from some of the other sort of Western brands in that $2,000 to $3,000 price. Do you have any comment on that? Is there something I'm maybe missing in the sort of the price to performance balance? Like for someone who's looking at buying a wheel set, why should they spend $4,200 on an NSW series?
So on an NSW wheel set, that particular wheel set has all of the technology that we can put in a wheel, whether it's a hub that's going to spin extra smooth and have super durable bearings that last in all types of weather, or it's a rim shape that's designed to allow you to ride in higher wind conditions than you would want to ride with that deep of a wheel. So, and that's the genesis of the 454. So the wheel set you've been referring to this whole time, Jesse. So the problem that we tried to solve back in 2016 with the 454 was we wanted riders to be able to ride confidently in higher wind situations with a deeper wheel. And so we explored and we pioneered a rim shape that gave us an advantage in crosswind situations that allowed riders to control their bike easier in a crosswind situation, and didn't cost aerodynamically any efficiency over a rim of a constant ID versus the undulating sawtooth ID that you see on NSW wheels. And so as we pioneered that rim shape, it's been borrowed and emulated by other companies. But when we really look at that wheel set, we have the data that shows our rim is as fast as other rims like it in the market and has better side wind control. And you don't see that data coming from other companies. That data comes from us. And so that was the whole purpose behind that rim in the first place. And that's why we've carried it through to the 858 and then eventually the 353, was to give a wheel set that performed aerodynamically like a deeper wheel set, but had the control of a shallower wheel set. And so overall, giving riders the best option for their particular discipline, whether it was, rolling to mountainous hills with a 353, flat to rolling hills with a 454, or time trials with an 858. Or if you're like me, in the summertime, I just put 858s on my road bike and roll because in Indianapolis it's flat, and it just helps me go fast.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So basically, the way we treat NSW, because I don't know if I've fully answered your question, Jesse, is we look at NSW as the place where we're going to put all of our technologies. And if that technology can become inexpensive enough to come down to an SW or Firecrest level wheel set, we'll bring it down there eventually. But at the moment, the laminate, the carbon material, the labor that goes into the rim, the testing that goes into the rims, all of that goes into the NSW stuff.
Yeah. Okay. But when would you expect the NSW, the 454 NSW rim shape to be updated? Is it like a 4-year cycle roughly?
I don't have that off the top of my head.
Not sure. Yeah. Because on one hand, yeah, I guess you're paying top of the market prices. But at the same time, it's a rim shape from 2021, 2022. That seems a little, that is not as modern as the new, the 303 SW, which handles the wider tires better. And so it's an awkward, I guess it's just the nature of being a big company. You can't update your rims every year. But I guess that's the bit that gets me, is you're kind of paying top dollar for a rim shape that was bleeding edge now 3 years ago. And you're probably going to have to be paying that for another 2 years until that gets updated. And for me, that's the sticking point that I struggle to.
It is a challenge that we don't have, number one, our engineers work half time. They only work 12 hours a day. But at the same time, good. I got to laugh. Good. But, at the same time, we have to choose where we spend those resources and what we do. And so sometimes those development timelines take longer than others. And when we come out with a new wheel set, it's going to be worthwhile. And when we compare with a lot of 60 millimeter deep wheels on the market, we're still as fast or faster. There are some out there that, maybe they're a little bit more aerodynamically efficient. Have they been tested in the real world? I haven't seen the data. We haven't tested them in the real world. And, the way we look at it too is aerodynamic testing is only one test. There's also how the wheel rolls. There's how the wheel shapes the tire and works with the tire to give the best rolling resistance and vibration loss. And so as we look at what creates a fast wheel, we know that there are still wheels out there that are deeper than our wheel, the 454, but aren't as fast in the real world. And it's by several watts. So, and so, what we see is we see, yes, in the wind tunnel, you may see a more aerodynamically efficient wheel because it's deeper. But in the real world, it may not be as fast because it doesn't roll as well. It doesn't work with the tire as well. Mm-hmm. And so that's one of the differences that we see in the market today, is that there are still wheel companies making decisions in the wind tunnel that eventually slow riders down in the real world.
Oh, I won't disagree with that. Yeah. One of my pet peeves on it.
What is the most popular Zipp wheel set? What is the best selling wheel?
303 Firecrest right now.
Interesting. Okay, so that 303 30 mil is still the. Okay, yeah, that's interesting.
So and as we talk to riders, as we talk to bike companies, that 303 Firecrest works in a lot of places, and that's one of the reasons why we focused on that 303 SW to work in a lot of places, so that it could continue to drive that use case forward. And I've been at Zipp for 22 years. And over that time, I've seen the 404 be the most popular wheel and gradually move to the 303 and shift back to the 404. And now it's back to the 303. It just depends on the time frame and what's popular in bicycles and bicycle racing. And I think there's a trend to move back to deeper wheels. And so we may see that change again in the next couple of years.
Is there a pro team that uses the Goodyear tires and Zipp together?
Not at the moment.
Yeah.
a lot of that is driven by the fact that um, some of our professional team contracts and sponsorships predate our relationship with Goodyear. So
Gotcha.
down the road, you may see something different. Through our sponsorships, through the work we've done in the industry, we have relationships with all the major tire manufacturers. Like, it's about once a month. Our engineering teams will touch base with engineering teams at most of the major tire manufacturers. Um, just especially if it's a if it's a company that we share a team with, we're talking with them on a regular basis to make sure that we're up to speed with what they want to see happen at a particular bike race. So, earlier this year, we had a rider who was really questioning what they should ride at Strada Bianchi. And we did some research with their tire sponsor and really put together the best package for the best event, um, best effort overall on the day. And, I'm not going to take credit for Pidcock's ride because that was a gutsy ride. And he's the guy putting the power through the pedals. But there was some work done on the sponsorship side to make sure he had the best overall system for the day.
Is that common? I mean, you probably can't comment on that, can you? Because yeah, because sometimes we have a couple of sort of friends who do ride, in the pro peloton, and it still seems a lot of like, oh, I don't know, have a look at the stage profile tomorrow. I'll just throw the 40s on. It's a bit flatter. Throw the 60s on. It's all very much text the mechanic the day before the stage type stuff. But I suppose it depends what level you're at and all that kind of stuff. But it's that's kind of reassuring to hear. If that makes sense.
It depends on team to team, and it depends on rider to rider. When you have a team that's really interested in helping a rider or a group of riders succeed, they're going to reach out to us and see if they can find any advantage they can. And sometimes you have other teams that feel like they have that handled. They already have an in-house scientist that's going to do that work for them and make the best decisions for their riders. And some teams don't have that. And so we work where we can, and we don't work. Sometimes we only get consulted a couple times a year by a team. Other times it's, hey, we have this race coming up. What do you think the best setup is? So, and specifically to Pidcock, we were asked to sort of analyze X wheelset with X tire and Y wheelset with Y tire and what's the best. And we did that analysis, and he ended up on this V3SW with Corsa Pro 30 millimeter tires.
So the new hubs are ceramic bearings, and it's a bit of a hot debate in the last few years. Do you do the ceramic upgrade, or you just stick with steel? Steel might last longer. The ceramic rolls faster. What's Zipp's opinion on that whole debate with the new hubs?
Well, you can make an inexpensive bearing roll fast, and the way you do that is a non-contact seal or a shield and a lightweight grease or a light grease fill. The downside is that bearing isn't going to last. Mm-hmm. And so to be able to get a bearing that spins with low drag and lasts requires some real work. And so, a lot of the aftermarket bearings you see on the market, they're designed to spin well and spin with low drag. Some of them don't necessarily last. And so one of the things, a bit of history about our hub development. So back in late 1990s, SRAM purchased Sachs. And the history with Sachs is Ernst Sachs created the bicycle freewheel, and the internals of the bicycle freewheel that he created are the basis of a lot of driver bodies today. And, that was all done at the Schweinfurt facility where Zipp hubs are designed today. So the Schweinfurt facility that SRAM owns has designed and or manufactured hubs and bearings for over 100 years. It's a cool little piece of history. And today it's just a design facility. It's no longer a manufacturing facility, but our hub design team works there. And taking all of that historical knowledge that is basically stored in that building. What we did was we used what we knew was required to make a low drag bearing. And then we also used what we knew was required to make a high durability bearing. And we went to because we don't make our own bearings, we went to our vendors. And what we did was, one, we wanted a high precision ceramic ball. And that just gives you that smooth rolling. And then what we also had to do was design the races to be very durable. And so we started looking at different materials, and we settled on a saltwater resistant stainless steel. That's actually the same stainless steel used in prosthetic hips and prosthetic knees. So if you think about the environment that a prosthetic hip is in, it's in a salty environment, so it has to be corrosion resistant, and it's in a high wear environment, so it has to be durable. And so we took that stainless steel. That's what we have our races made out of. And then we give it an appropriate grease fill and then 2 non-contact seals. And what that does for us is that gives us a low drag bearing with high durability. One of the ways we test durability is a saltwater spray test. And it's just continuous spray on the bearing itself as it rolls. And we measure that in time. And so our ceramic bearings with that saltwater resistant stainless steel last 96 hours in that saltwater spray test without seeing corrosion. And we see some aftermarket bearings starting to corrode after 24 hours. And so that tells us that we're on the right track from a durability perspective.
Is the durability better than the previous steel bearings that you used?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Interesting.
So, and then across the board at Firecrest level, we're starting to use a stainless steel bearing that's going to be moved into or phased in over the year. And that's going to give riders a higher level of durability as well. And so basically what we've done is we've upgraded the bearings both at SW or / Firecrest level, as well as NSW level. And then moving to that super low drag, high durability bearing that you see at an SW level now. So, and also too, at SW level, those bearings are designed, the outboard side has a full contact seal, so it's fully sealed. And so you'll see a black seal on the outside. The inboard side of the bearings have a non-contact seal or a blue seal. And so what that does is that gives a smoother rolling bearing on the seat with that non-contact seal on the more sealed side of the hub. And then where you're going to see water ingress and dirt ingress on the outboard side, you've got that full contact seal that protects the bearing itself.
The 303 is 40 mil deep. That's always confused me. I think it's 30.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the 303 originally was 38 millimeters deep. And over the years, it's been as deep as 45 millimeters. And then we settled on 40 back in 2020. Because what we could do is get to the right mixture of aerodynamic performance, weight performance, and ride quality that we wanted to get out of that wheel set.
I wonder what the Explore 303, how wide is that? You go from tip of that enormous tire to the base of the rim.
So the rim itself is 40 millimeters wide and 54 millimeters deep. So when you stack a 40 millimeter tire on it, it's a 94 millimeter. It's about 94 millimeters deep.
It's like running an 80 mil.
It's like riding an 808.
Yeah.
It looks so sick on the bike.
Yeah. It is a lot of fun to roll up to a group ride. I mean, Chris, you've gotten to do it. It's a lot of fun to roll up to a group ride and people start looking at you funny. And then when things start going fast, you're still there.
All right, Nathan, I reckon we let you go. Thank you very much for your time. We really appreciate it. And we'll stay in touch.
Yeah, no problems. If you have any questions or anything else that we need to do, just let me know.